I am Abby Dobson, president of Now NYC. Hello, Kathryn. We are very excited to have you with us today as a candidate for mayor of New York City. Before we begin, we want to encourage you to continue to let us know who you are in the chat. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We want to hear from you and hope to get to a number of your questions today. As Jean has also mentioned, please be sure to visit our website and check out Kathryn Garcia's questionnaire, as well as the questionnaires from the other mayoral candidates. It's extensive, and we hope that it will help you in your decision-making as you review and evaluate each of the candidates for mayor. As you know, we've been waiting for this day. With us is Kathryns Garcia. Ms. Garcia is a public servant who has served as New York City's 43rd Sanitation Commissioner under Mayor de Blasio. She also worked at the city's Department of Environmental Protection under Mayor Bloomberg, rising to Chief Operating Officer. Kathryns Garcia also served as interim chair and CEO of the New York City Housing Authority and was appointed food czar for New York's emergency food program during the COVID-19 emergency response. Kathryns Garcia, it's such a pleasure to welcome you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Abby. I really appreciate being here.
Thank you. We'd like to start with a few quick questions before we dive into the meat and potatoes of our questions, so that people can learn a little bit more about you beyond your policy proposals and your policy visions. So, Kathryn, tell us about your love for New York City and what this city means to you.
So I am a born and bred Brooklynite. Anyone else from another borough, forgive me. And have spent my entire life here, went to public schools. I grew up in a big family, a diverse family, because I was adopted, as were two of my siblings. But it was about playing on the street, a little bit of stickball, a little bit of skelly. But I love all of the different neighborhoods of New York, all the different cultural opportunities, all of the different restaurants. I actually, particularly when I was working on food, felt like there are 8.4 million New Yorkers, and they are all food snobs, and expect to have food available from every nationality across the city at any time of day.
Wonderful. I am also a Brooklynite in that I grew up in Brooklyn, love Brooklyn, Brooklyn all day. No matter where I live, I claim Brooklyn. Can you share with us a moment in your life when you faced true adversity, how you overcame it, and how your response to this adversity influences your ability to lead New York City, arguably one of the greatest and most challenging cities in the world?
So when I was at the Department of Environmental Protection, we had a series. I mean, obviously Hurricane Sandy ended up being sort of the most significant, but the year before we had a series of, fires, water main breaks, Hurricane Irene. And I was also at that point a working mom and trying to make sure that I was caring for New Yorkers, but also being there for my children at a moment when they were in the glorious middle school years, and being able to prioritize and understand how to do that effectively in both spheres of your life and not let one or the other fall apart. I know this is what women do day in and day out, but that was a moment where I was like, I'm not sure I've got this, that I may have let this really get skewed, and making sure that I was recommitted to finding that balance again was sort of what I bring to the table as a leader, understanding, particularly for women, for all families, but how we are being our best at everything that we are choosing to work on, and still being able to be present for our families, whether or not that's your children or your parents. So much of that is what I know the day-to-day struggle is.
Absolutely. I think as women, we do walk a particular tightrope in society in many ways. And speaking of that, do you consider yourself to be a feminist? And if so, when did you first realize that you were a feminist?
So I considered myself to be a feminist. I really feel like since childhood. You know, part of the world in which we were talking about the ERA, uh, talking about how women needed to be in the workplace. It just never even occurred to me that I would not have a thriving career and that I would not be striving to make sure that I was being treated equally and that everyone else around me as women were being treated equally. And sometimes there's such microaggressions that they don't listen to you. You're talking, it's your idea, but they're these little, oh, you just went on and moved on without actually hearing me. Um, and supporting women in the workplace and making sure that we have a seat at the table and that we belong at that seat at the table.
Absolutely. I think there are probably many, if not all, women on this Zoom call who can relate to that. Um, so we did a poll recently of our members. Here at Now, as you would imagine, we our goal is to keep women front and center. In a recent poll we conducted of our members, more than 60% felt that mayoral candidates were not putting women front and center in their campaigns. How do you plan to put women and girls front and center if elected mayor of New York City? How do you plan to change the landscape for women and girls in the first 4 years of a Garcia administration?
And, thank you for that feedback for all of us who are running because women and girls are what make it happen in the city of New York, and they have to be supported. And so for our youngest, it is ensuring that they have real opportunity and aren't pigeonholed into a certain career or another career. That they can be the electricians or the iron workers if they so choose, or they can be the sanitation workers. By the way, I did, one of my sanitation workers just recently got promoted to supervisor, but she is also the former Miss Staten Island. You can wear a lot of different hats as women. But as we grow into our older selves, the economic challenges that we face as women, the expectation that we will do the majority of the childcare and the housework, even if we are in progressive woke relationships, we still end up bearing much more of that burden and having real policies that support women. And that's, you need free childcare. It is the same thing as having a subway to get on to get to work. You can't go to work if you don't have free childcare where you know that your child is safe. Uh, that you have access to capital as entrepreneurs, that we are making those connections to angel investors. This is an opportunity that we are not really leveraging in the city of New York. Women often are locked out of that access, and the city can be really helpful in this area. We have to be the city where women want to do business, but also use the power of the purchasing by the government to support women-owned businesses. So it's about understanding the family needs of women, but also the opportunity and the progress we can all make because we do belong in the C-suite.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. In that same poll, almost half of the respondents to our Women Front and Center poll, 46% to be exact, said that COVID had impacted their career. Some of the real hardships people mentioned include being fired or furloughed, about 12%, being forced to take on more work for the same pay, earning less income, or facing fewer career opportunities. How will your plan for New York's economic recovery address the particular vulnerability of essential care workers, many of whom are women of color, struggling to make ends meet in New York City? And we're talking about our domestic workers, childcare workers, restaurant workers, grocery store workers.
Yes, I've been saying it for a while, and I think the New York Times article captured it well. Women were the backup plan and the most vulnerable to economic uh, fallout from this. And, we also saw that even for women who were able to maintain employment, 1 in 4 were just completely going to step back because of Zoom school, because of all of the other care needs that happened in many people's families, whether or not that was caring for someone who was sick or caring for your kids, that we ended up being the ones who were going to cover that, of course, for free, because the value of our work dollar wise is often just not there. And when you look at who is doing this critical work, when it's women, we are not actually paying them. So it's for where the city has opportunity is how we do our contracts for things like home care workers, how we do our contracts for daycare workers. And even if they're not direct employees and they're paid through a nonprofit, making sure that the nonprofit sector is able to have career paths for primarily women and women of color who make up their workforce.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Women have left the workforce due to childcare responsibilities and the crisis in childcare affordability for working parents, which has been increasingly exacerbated during the pandemic. And you touched on it briefly in your last response.
Mhm.
What is your specific plan to make childcare more affordable for working mothers, particularly those who need to work to make ends meet, and for those who need childcare for school-aged children for a few hours, even after school hours?
We have to have free childcare for people making under $70,000 a year from 0 to 3, in a combination of those who are already able to do it and then opening up more centers, because I actually assume that the demand will go up. Uh, and then as we get into the elementary years, one, school should be open. School needs to be open 5 days a week. Hybrid, the closures, just disastrous, not only for our students, but for parents. And having after school is going to be critical, not just for women who are working, but also for the fact that we have so much education to make up and so much support we need to do with these kids, which is why I have said I will do art and music and theater and sports and make every elementary school a magnet school. Because we know the socio emotional impact is there. We just don't know what the trauma is going to manifest itself as.
Absolutely.
It could be depression, it could be aggression. We don't know. We got to be prepared for both and treating it with the tenderness that it deserves.
Thank you for that. Our members certainly believe that we need to elevate underrepresented voices, and this includes women, particularly women of color. Our next mayor should ensure that our New York City communities are reflected in their staff and leadership positions. How does the makeup of your current campaign staff reflect the diversity of New York City?
The campaign staff reflects all the ethnicities of New York City, but I would say we probably are a little, senior staff's a little heavily dominated by women.
That's great to know. Great to know. One of our members had a question. We try to integrate member questions. And one is, how do you plan to tackle long-term unemployment in New York City?
Long-term unemployment is first and foremost making sure your economic development goals and your workforce development goals are merged together. They often sit very separately within how we program, how we plan. That has to be integrated. Uh, we also know what is coming. Protecting us from climate change for the infrastructure we're going to need with offshore wind. We need to be training for those jobs right now. Women need to be part of that training. And for our younger people, whether or not they are coming out of our trade schools or coming out of our CUNY system, that we have 10,000 internships, that we have good first jobs and careers, because we want people to be able to afford to raise their families on their paychecks. Uh, that is absolutely about opportunity and about the jobs that we know the city is going to create. It will be in biotech. It will be in life sciences. It will be in tech. It will be in film and movies. and it will be in infrastructure around our investments in climate change. We have to have a workforce ready to go.
Great, thank you. How do you plan to support, this is another member question, how do you plan to support new entrepreneurs and small businesses from the growing gentrification of corporate chains in New York City? And how would you support small business owners like restaurant owners and workers to help them get back on their feet?
Small businesses are the lifeblood of this city. They're 50% of our private sector employment. This is why early on I put out my reopen to stay open plan, cutting the bureaucracy. It literally takes 8 different agencies before you can sell a bowl of soup, some crazy amount, uh, with one city permit for small businesses. We'll take care of the back end. You just fill it out online. Very similar to how we think about open restaurants. We have the capacity to do things in a streamlined manner. We just choose not to. 0% loans for small businesses to make sure that they can pay the rent. A program to promote small businesses in all of our neighborhoods called the Rediscover NYC. Opening up our public realm, not only to open restaurants, but also to art and culture, so that there are performances, and fixing the concession permits that require so much time, because we want women entrepreneurs to be focused on marketing and hiring and what they are going to do with their business, and not trying to figure out the Byzantine nature of city government. And it is also about making sure we are connecting them to capital, so that they can grow and expand and be successful in the city of New York. And it's also our local businesses that make us more interesting than anywhere else. If it's just a CVS, well, you can find those everywhere. That's not unique. And we need to be unique, because we're also going to be in competition with other cities. And we want to make sure that we are, as always, the best city in the world.
Thank you for that. I think it's really important, increasing capital for so many communities that historically have not been able to get access to capital in an equitable way. Many of our members, we polled them, and not surprisingly, certain issues came to the top.
Mhm.
Housing, safety, education. They ranked as the top issues for the next mayor of New York City. With respect to education, a child's New York City zip code can often predict her life's chances. This is particularly true with respect to the role of public school education on a child's life chances in New York. In 2021, regrettably, schools are still very segregated. Resources, whether we're talking about libraries, technology, the school building structure and outdoor space, money for support personnel for wraparound services, after school learning opportunities for arts and STEM education, which you referred to earlier, change from one zip code to the next. And these inequities have been compounded in the pandemic. One of our members has a third grader in a public school in a diverse immigrant community in Queens. And she writes that our PTA raises less than $15,000 annually, while other PTAs in wealthier areas raise hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire additional staff and provide enrichment programs and quality after-school activities for their kids. And so the question is twofold. What specific plans do you have to address inequities in access to quality public school education in New York City, including inequities in funding? And what will you do as mayor to make sure that every public school can offer these benefits, regardless of how much the parents earn?
It is still surprising to me that we don't fund the schools equally, that we actually systematically underfund some schools over others. Uh, we need a thriving school system, which is why I've said that every elementary school will have basically the same model as a gifted and talented banquet school in every single school, because we need to bring every child back into the building and have them have real access and real ability to make sure they find all of their talents. You know, occasionally I think I can paint. I can actually make the brush go on the canvas, but not a lot of talent, but it's still enjoyable. Um,
That's
and
important.
huh?
That's important.
That's important. It's still enjoyable. No, it will not be hanging in any galleries. Uh, but we don't do that for every school. And it's expensive. I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to cost over $200 million to make that happen, but it's incredibly important that it does happen. Uh, because every kid needs that opportunity to really fully develop who they're going to be in the future. And I am committed to making it so that we are equitably funded regardless of your zip code and that we have all of the additional pieces of it. And we're supporting principals and teachers, taking money out of headquarters and making sure it's there. We're going to need mental health professionals in all of our schools. We're going to need to have access to more broadband in our school buildings. I was on the phone with the principal and she's like, oops, I'm gone. Like she literally didn't even have full access in the building, let alone what we need to do in people's homes. It's a changing economy and we have to have our kids prepared for that when they grow up, and also have some fun in school. Not all of it has to be you sit at a desk. It really has to be where we're creating the critical thinking, which is overlapping interesting curriculum, but as well as making sure we're also identifying kids who may have learning issues so that we are teaching them to how they are going to learn best, whether or not that's dyslexia or something along those lines, and continuing to make all of our schools barrier free so that everyone can go to any school.
Thank you for that. Education with regards to our children, arguably our most important resources, ultimately. How do we pay for it? How do we pay for um, the free childcare that you talked about? How do we pay for making schools equitable across the board? What is your plan for that?
Yes, so we have dug into the numbers, and part of it is about some back of the office stuff about refinancing our debt because we spend about $1 billion on debt service right now. We can lower that by hundreds of millions of dollars. Working with our labor unions to find productivity savings. I did this at DEP. We reduced the operating budget by $100 million without a layoff. That we continue to provide efficient services so we can make strategic investments. But I know right now today there's $130 million in headquarters at DOE that needs to be in the classrooms.
Thank you for that. What is your plan to reduce crime and improve safety, and how do you balance this with the clear and undeniable need for meaningful transformation in policing, particularly with respect to combating police brutality and ensuring police accountability?
I have a really robust plan about how we reform the police department, but also how we are tackling the rise in gun violence, the rise in anti-Asian hate crime, and the rise in subway crime, all of which are through the roof. Uh, we need to make it so that the officers are older, that they're 25, that they live in the city, that we are doing very intensive training, not only of the new officers, but also of their supervisors. Those sergeants and lieutenants who tell you and give you direction every day are critically important to culture change, that we are promoting and measuring community engagement rather than just the number of arrests, because if you just measure arrests, you will get confrontation and arrest. But it is also holding officers accountable with really clear and transparent discipline that rebuilds trust with communities, because it's not just the egregious brutality we have to really make sure that we are eliminating the micro disrespects every day that people who are Black and brown confront with the NYPD is also something that has to be tackled. But we know that we are seeing rising crime in this city. Stopping the flow of guns the iron pipeline, working with our federal partners to do that. As I've said, there is not a gun manufacturer in the city of New York that I am aware of. They come from elsewhere. The gun suppression unit needs to be fully funded who do this investigative work, but it also is making sure that the neighborhood policing strategy is really a neighborhood policing strategy where they are off radio and not responding to 911 calls. That when they are needing to address a mental distress call, that they have a mental health professional with them at the time. I believe that we can have both, and it's personal to me. My brother is Black, he's 6 feet tall. I know that he gets treated differently than I do. I need him to be safe, and I need all of us to be safe in this city.
Just a quick follow-up. Disciplining police officers is important, but how do you quantify holding them accountable?
How do you do discipline?
How do you quantify holding them accountable? What
So
does that mean? What does that look like?
what does that look like? So as a uniform commissioner, I've had to discipline the forces. If you are late, you get docked a day's pay. If you take a bribe, you get fired. That it is apparent to the public and to the forces that they know what the consequences of that are. And the thing that is the worst for a good cop is a bad cop who's getting away with stuff. But it is also looking at our tactics at a higher level. Kettling does not work with protesters. You are just creating confrontation. For those of you who weren't out there, it means when you surround protesters by police, literally surround them. I don't know why it's called kettling, but that's what it looks like. If a protest that was literally probably going to peter out within an hour or so because it's 11 o'clock at night and it's like 98 degrees, suddenly you are in actual conflict with people who you should be guardians of, not warriors against.
Thank you for that. Do you have any specific plans for preventing and reducing the occurrence of gender-based violence in New York City, including sexual assault and rape?
I'm sorry, I lost your. Good.
Do you have any specific plans for preventing and reducing the occurrence of gender-based violence in New York City, including sexual assault and rape?
First and foremost, we do need to fully fund the sexual victims unit in the NYPD. It's never been done to be able to deal with people who have experienced assault with the respect and dignity that they need during that time of trauma. We need to make sure that we are expanding the ability for people to notify, but it's also keeping women out of the situations in the first place. Do you stay in a domestic violence because you don't have housing? Do you stay in something that you know is dangerous because you are afraid that you could fall into the real depths of poverty? So it's supporting women to prevent them from falling into these situations that can be more dangerous. But it's also ensuring that we have patrol where we have data that shows that there is an escalation of those types of rape or of sexual violence against women, and hold people accountable for all levels of it, because it will live with you forever. And it is something that obviously can have a huge range from sexual harassment to real sexual assault, but all are traumatic and all are not forgettable. And so dealing with the underlying challenges of why a woman may stay in a dangerous situation, to also making sure when she is out in the world or in the workplace that we are protecting women is vitally important.
Absolutely. Protecting women is vitally important. I couldn't have said it any better.
And,
Just a
and
couple
we
of,
are often we are more often than not the victims of felonies.
right, absolutely. Shifting a little bit, one of the other primary concerns was housing. People are moving out of New York City because it just isn't affordable anymore for many New Yorkers. While this has been exacerbated by the pandemic, this trend started well before the pandemic. One marker of New York City's increasing unaffordability is reflected in the housing market. quote unquote affordable housing is no longer affordable to middle and low income earners in New York. One member, a New York City agency worker, complains, where is affordable housing for New York City agency workers who are mainly frontline workers and make $60,000 rather and below? They can't afford New York Housing Connect and they're not eligible for Section 8. Um, what signature policy are you proposing to significantly increase the affordability of housing in New York City for New York City agency workers and all New Yorkers? What will you do differently from your predecessors?
First and foremost, we have a supply and demand problem. It's simple economics. We don't build enough, period, at any level. And so we are all chasing. It almost feels like musical chairs. Somebody always gets left out. Everyone's trying to sit down. Somebody's getting left out.
Absolutely.
So that's time is money in construction. Making it so that we're getting building permits done and fire department done allows the private sector to go and work and move more quickly. The city should use its subsidy to make it so that there is deeply affordable housing, less than 50%, 30% of AMI, which is about $30,000 a year. We have to fix NYCHA. There are 400,000 people who live in NYCHA. There is a plan. We should follow the plan so they get new bathrooms, new kitchens, new elevators. We have to use all the resources of the city to really combat this and build, particularly where there's transit options and there are schools, so that people have real opportunity when we're looking at this. But also, let's incentivize accessory dwellings to become permanent housing. Let's look at conversions of hotels or office space that coming out of COVID may not still have that use. This can be an opportunity to really get more supply into the markets that people have homes, because we know housing heals. It allows kids to get an education. It allows their parents to get access to more jobs and more stable career opportunities, and you end up being healthier.
I love that. Housing heals. That's just incredibly important. But we also know that housing is impacted by a person's or a family's income and wealth. How do you plan to address current levels of poverty in New York City experienced by cash and wealth poor New Yorkers who are often left out of the conversation when we talk about policy plans and prescriptions during elections?
We have to have the social service agencies of the city of New York come together and see that person as a person and make sure they are getting all of the benefits that they are eligible for. For example, we leave a ton of money on the table from the federal government for SNAP benefits. If we had everyone enrolled, we would actually have hundreds of millions of dollars coming into the city going directly to our local grocery stores. We don't make it so that you are then connected to job training so that you can expand and have more opportunity, that you have the housing voucher that you need or the cash assistance that you need to be able to support. We make you go to every single different little agency, which is incredibly inefficient, incredibly stressful, and does not help you solve the problem.
Thank you for that. And just a few more quick questions. We know that you're busy, and we thank you so much for taking the time.
And I'm a little bit delayed. I was actually at a memorial service for the folks at Sanitation who died during COVID. They lost 9 members during COVID. So
that was important.
Yeah.
In 3 words, what is your leadership style?
I am a team builder who likes to empower the people that work for me. I know that as a leader, you need to actually listen more than you talk, because you will get the best ideas when you have the smartest people in the room. But you have to hold people accountable, and you have to be very clear about what your vision is.
Thank you for that. Who and what inspires you as a leader?
So I am inspired actually by the people on the front lines. I am inspired by the teacher who's walking into the classroom today, the sanitation worker who went out and picked up the garbage. They are what inspire me to get up and do this work, because I know that they're impacting people's lives. And as a leader, I always feel my job is to give those folks the tools they need to be successful uh, when we are serving the public, that the public has to be a customer. It's an almost radical thing, most radical progressive thing, making government work for people.
Hmm. Thank you for that. One fact about you that would surprise people.
I'm actually a little shy.
Hmm. Good to know. Um, that is surprising. What is your self care practice? Do you have one?
uh, I used to be better at this before I started running for office, but uh, I like to go do a manicure and pedicure uh, and get the 10-minute back massage.
Oh, I love those. I love those as well. Um, what do you want? Well, why do you want this job? And why are you the best person to be the next mayor of New York City?
Like, I want this job because I do want to serve New Yorkers, and I have the expertise and the demonstrated knowledge about how to actually make real plans that will be transformative happen. Uh, I like to listen to all the voices of New Yorkers. Sometimes they can be interesting, um, but all good, all good. But being of service is incredibly important and meaningful to me personally. And this is not something that I have ever particularly wanted to do. I didn't want to be a politician when I was growing up. I didn't take poli sci. I wasn't running for student president. I liked being able to just get the work done. But in this moment, with what we are confronted in this city, I'm the only person who understands how we can actually really rise and rise better than we were before.
And my last question, um, if elected mayor of New York City and the first woman mayor at that, uh,
It's shocking, right? It's shocking that it's the first.
in 400 plus years, right?
Little shocking.
Um,
I think we're at 400 2023.
beyond experienced leadership and crisis management that is efficient, strong, and effective, how do you plan to inspire New Yorkers to reimagine and transform the city that we all love?
Being able to lead this city in this time of crisis is to also give them, everyone, all of us, a vision of what the future looks like. What the future looks like is real opportunity and inclusion across arts, across finance, across uh, the trades. But it also is thinking about a future in which we are greening our city, because that will make us healthier and protect the environment. To make every school roof a green roof, to make boulevards of green and reimagine our public realm. We still don't have street trees, particularly in our Black and Brown communities where we have the highest asthma rates.
Mhm.
Having parks in those communities, as we saw, parks were infrastructure. They were our exercise locations, they were our offices, they were our party spaces all during COVID. We need to make sure that we're investing in them, but in all neighborhoods. So it is a greener city where we are working together to make it so that everyone has real opportunity in the new 21st century. But it's got to be a livable city. It's got to be an affordable city, uh, because otherwise we won't make it.
Well said. Thank you so much, Kathryn Garcia, for spending your lunchtime with us. I know that you have important things to do, including spending time with people, unfortunately, who lost the families of people who unfortunately lost their lives during COVID in the sanitation department. So thank you so much for being here with us and for letting us know just a little bit more about who you are as a person and as a candidate. And we hope that this is helpful to our members who some of them are undecided, but some of them I think all of them are looking for more information. And it's been great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time and everyone who joined on Zoom. Thank you so much, Abby.